going to go check that email account to see if anyone sent a question that I can be prepared for you for beforehand. All right. Seth is now becoming the host. All right. Welcome, people. We have noticed that people know that I'm going to be making announcements and decide not to show up until after. Like, because if you're coming to multiple sessions, you're like, I've heard it. I can miss like the first part of the movie is the previews, right? So I expect people to come rolling on in just a minute. Refreshing this. I don't have any pre-questions. Also, we're excited about the contest. People are voting like crazy. Thanks for sharing that link. Super cool. All right, as you come in, please, yes, introduce yourself. Let us know. I think the message that we just got came into the panelists, and I don't know how to interpret that. It's numbers and a symbol. But
might have been accidental.
Yeah. All right.
Might have been another cat.
Drop in. It's okay. Drop your name, where you're from, your newsletter. If you have a link to it, we'd love for you to drop that in the chat. I'm going to wait until it's 3 exactly right now. Okay, so we have a couple of like housekeeping things that we announce at the beginning of each Newsletter Fest session. And that is that we are in a Zoom webinar right now. So that means there's a chat bubble, and that's got one little bubble, and there is a Q&A with 2. Please try to ask your questions in the Q&A so that we can keep up with them. And I will interrupt Anum if there's a question that is going along with what she's saying, so we can have a little conversation about that and keep moving. So yes, as you come in, name, where you're from, your newsletter, etc. So other little announcements to make. We do have a Newsletter Fest Slack community going on right now that is intended to replace the thing that you get when you go to live events in person and you actually get to meet other people who do what you do and connect with them. And that doesn't seem to happen as well in a Zoom Slack as it does in a Zoom chat as a Slack community. So we have built that to kind of replace and be maybe the new online version of live in-person events. So love to see you there. We have 2 contests going on this week. If you don't know about them, one is for a free Curated account, and we don't have many entries yet, and that is something that people can vote for. So if you're interested in a free year of Curated, which is a great value, go whip up a mock-up of a newsletter and post it in the contest. People are voting. You can also go through that link to vote. And then we have Newsletters of the Year awards going out on Friday based on the voting that you are doing right now. So please click that link and go vote for your favorites. You can do that once a day. That's all I got. It's been an amazing Newsletter Fest, and it's about to get even better because we're talking to Anum Hussain of Below the Fold, and she is going to tell us how to manage our newsletters like products. So excited to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Ashley, Seth, and hope everyone's been enjoying Newsletter Fest. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Seth, I might have forgotten to allow that, so it might be up to you. But it looks like it miraculously happened. So
awesome, cool. Awesome. Well, it's a heads up. She just jumped off, but if you see a tail at any point, that's just my cat. She gets notoriously jealous when I'm on Zoom calls, so heads up for that. But yeah. Everyone can see everything, everyone can hear everything, so let's dive right in. My session is going to be, as mentioned, how to treat your newsletter like a product. So to give context to this, a little bit about me. I started my career as a journalist at the Boston Globe and a couple other small digital companies. Really was just obsessed with storytelling and really evolved my storytelling skills when I joined Boston-based HubSpot. I joined that company when they were at less than 200 employees and grew through 1,000 and IPO. Now they're who knows how big, but that was a really integral time because we were figuring out a lot of how we did storytelling as well. And so I kind of got to figure out, okay, as a journalist, I was focused on reporting and telling stories that were important. But at HubSpot, I was focused on really thinking about our audience and what content mattered best for them, running experiments, testing, and really optimizing for their needs as well as ours. Then I realized I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay in marketing anymore. Wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Went to get my MBA purely because I loved in undergrad just having a million internships to figure out what I wanted to do, and decided to run that back with a grad program and realized what I missed most was media. But now through this lens of tech and optimization, all of which didn't exist in my former life as a journalist. And so that led me to a different startup that led me to Below the Fold. And so now I'm the co-founder of Below the Fold, which is a newsletter that's helping you discover important news you aren't hearing anywhere else. I'm sure you're tired of hearing newsletter pitches, but I think I'm allowed to just give a little bit of an explainer of what we do. And so if, like my team, you are sick of hearing the same 3 to 4 headlines every single week, whether it's about impeachment or GameStop or insert trending story of the week, and you're like, there must be more happening. That's what we do. We dig into those hidden stories, explain them thoroughly so that it's easy to understand what's been going on, even if it's been an ongoing story for years, and package it for you a few times a week. And so my career in journalism and email marketing and digital marketing has all sort of come together to make Below the Fold happen. And that's really the backstory for my talk as well, is it's really my exposure to product teams, to marketing teams, and what I learned during that time that I apply now as a creator of my newsletter that I hope to share with you all. So the biggest thing I learned when I was running content at HubSpot, I was responsible, obviously, if you know of HubSpot, you know we have a few major blogs, a marketing blog, a sales blog, a services blog, but the sales blog didn't exist when I joined. And so that was my task, was to create an entire new content engine, subscriber base, and community for our future sales products. They didn't exist yet. We were purely in the marketing vertical, and we wanted to move into the sales vertical. And so I did what I had been taught, what I had read online. This was back, 2012, 2013. 2014, and it was like, you get subscribers, you send them content. That was really it, right? And for many teams today, it's still that. But when I worked with our product managers, who I had to work closely with, we were about a team of 10 to help them with their copy. They were focused on 3 big buckets: user retention, user churn, and user onboarding. And when I say they were focused, I mean they were maniacally obsessed with these 3 things. Every experiment they ran, every test they did, everything they focused on was, does it benefit retention? Does it benefit churn? Or does it benefit onboarding, which can also benefit retention and churn? And so that got me thinking, well, why don't we think of our subscribers in this way? Why don't we focus, instead of focusing solely on, okay, how do we grow the biggest list possible? Why aren't our conversations more focused on subscriber retention, subscriber churn, and subscriber onboarding? And so that's the foundation of what we're going to be going through today, each of these buckets, starting, of course, with subscriber retention as the first. I'll also say this is my first time clicking through the Canva deck in like live present mode, which is just scrolling. I wasn't aware we were going to have all these little quick flashy builds. So hopefully that's not disturbing to anyone, or makes it enjoying. But going into retention. So product teams measure their growth based on engagement metrics. You might have heard of these different active user numbers for different products. And so Facebook, for example, is obsessed with daily active users. They're doing whatever it is in their possibility to make sure that their users are actively using Facebook every day. When I was at HubSpot and working on these sales products, we focus on weekly active users. We had tools that help sales reps better engage with their customers, track their emails, things of that nature, which were really more weekly active measures. And then Spotify, you'll notice if you ever read about their performance or how they're doing, they focus on monthly active users. There's a lot of different things that go into which you decide, daily, weekly, or monthly. Most people usually fall in the bank of weekly, unless you really have a product that requires engagement on a very, very regular basis. And so that pulls you more to daily. But really what this number is just looking at is it's a reflection of how well you're holding on to your readers, right? When you think about reader retention, it's just this active metric that helps you realize, okay, people are signing up for my newsletter. Are they actually staying? I mean, we've all heard, and if you watch The Office, you know the famous scene between Ryan and Dwight and Michael when they ask, what's more expensive, signing on a new customer or keeping a new one? And we know that signing on a new customer is more expensive. The same thing stays true for readers. If someone's already given you their email, they've given you that willingness. Trying to get someone's new willingness is always going to be harder. And so if we're just growing our list and losing them and continuing to grow, that's much more difficult than growing a list and retaining that list, making sure that those readers stick around for the long run. And so newsletters should do the same. So whether you're a daily, a weekly, a monthly, there's some sort of bucket you can put yourself in and look at what your active subscribers should look like. Obviously, I understand that for selling sponsorships or external looks, you might tout your larger subscriber number and say, okay, this is how many total subscribers you have. But internally, I recommend being more obsessed with the number of active subscribers you have versus total. And there's a couple of different reasons. One is I found during my time at HubSpot, sometimes I would get these really negative responses to our emails or feedback to change things. And then when I looked into the data behind some of the people who would give our more negative feedback, oftentimes they weren't even the people who are most engaged with us. And so I was like, why should I change how we do things if the people who love what we do aren't affected by it, right? Because ultimately you want to be optimizing for your biggest fans, not your biggest critics, because the critics are probably going to leave eventually. You want to be focused on those active, engaged subscribers. So I use MailChimp, and I know a lot of different ESPs have some internal tooling that can help with you, but MailChimp uses this 5-star system where they rank contacts on a rating of 1 through 5. And so basically, we can quickly see if someone is not yet engaged. Usually that's a new subscriber. They come in at 2 stars and they haven't given us any signals to show they're not going to be engaged, which drops them down to 1 star, or they are somewhat engaged or highly engaged. Obviously, the 4 to 5 star is what we're really looking for. People who are regularly opening our email, engaging with our content. And those are the people that we send our best surveys to, that we ask our most important questions to, that we focus on understanding how can we make below the fold better. We want to hear from those engaged contacts because their voice will actually help us grow because they're already invested in our product enough to be paying attention. But of course, there's also the simple math way to do it too. It's nothing fancy, even if this looks complicated. All you have to do for your sends is look at your number of subscribers, detract the number of bounces and the number of unsubscribes, and divide that by your number of subscribers to get your subscriber retention rate. So for example, if you have 1,000 subscribers and for your most recent send, 25 bounces, 120 unsubscribed, you're looking at about an 85% retention rate. That's obviously a great reader retention rate. If, as you can see, for a lot of people in the media industry, a 8-week retention rate over 25% is considered elite. So with retention rates, it's not like you're looking for 100% because that's impossible. We all know that we get lots of subscribers and a good percentage of them taper off, but you are looking for something above 25% to show, okay, at least a fourth of our audience is continuing to engage actively with us after subscribing. If it's anything less than that, it might be a flag to figure out, is there something we need to be figuring out if the majority of people are subscribing and then not retaining? And so in the early days of that HubSpot sales blog, as I mentioned, it didn't exist. And so that was part of our team's task. We invested heavily in growing subscribers. I mean, we did everything possible, whether it was the strategic way or not, to just get as many people on the list so that we had people to email. And we ended up really quickly growing to 60,000 subscribers, at which point we pumped the brakes. And after a few weeks, actually, it might have been a few months of sending emails, we realized that only a third were actually engaged with our content. We're talking about both. The two words can get mixed together. But really, 22,000 of our contacts were really engaged subscribers. They are paying attention. They were responding positively. They were really into the content that we were sending. And so that left us with 38,000 basically dormant people to do something with. And so at that point in time, I mean, again, this was this was like 2013. So this was before, now there's all this content about how to re-engage subscribers and what to do. None of that existed at this time. And so we were figuring out what do we do. And that brings us to our second section. We just learned about the importance of retention, but with those 38,000 subscribers, we had to figure out what do we do with subscriber churn. And so this was something I realized while I was on that team, is that when users stop using a product, growth teams mark them as churn. They're like, all right, goodbye, Ashley. You're no longer using Curated. You know, we're going to find someone who like loves Curated. Seth loves Curated. We're going to focus on him. But when a subscriber stops reading, they still get emailed. How many times do you go to your promotions tab or maybe there's a big holiday and you get some email from a brand that you literally haven't engaged with in years, and you're like, what? How am I still on your email list? How am I still getting contact from you? And that happens all the time. We continue to blast people with content when they've given us every possible signal that they're no longer interested. And this hurts your engagement rates, it hurts your spam rates, and it just creates a bad reflection with potential contacts who could come back later. Maybe at this point in time, your product isn't ready for them. Maybe you evolve in the future to have content that they are interested in, but they're going to have that bad instinct of like, oh, okay, there's below the fold again, emailing me on Valentine's Day, even though I haven't, talked to them in years. And so that was something that I really started thinking about. And we went ahead and removed 38,000 people from our list just in one full swing. It was very scary at the moment, and there's better ways to do it, which we'll get into. But again, at that point in 2014, we didn't really know what else you could do. And so we were like, you know what? If these people aren't engaging with us, just goodbye. We're going to focus on those 22,000 people who are super engaged and try to grow our database with more subscribers like them. But of course, we wanted to get more creative as time went on. We couldn't just get rid of a huge dose of people every time this happened. And so we started doing different things. One was unsubscribe campaigns. Now, I apologize. This is probably really blurry. Again, this is like an email from, I think, 2015. So I don't have access to the original anymore to have a better look. But basically, we started sending these unsubscribe campaigns where every quarter I would look at who has not opened our emails out of our subscriber base at all that entire quarter. 3 months have gone by, zip, no engagement whatsoever. And we would add them to these unsubscribe campaigns. And they had to be subscribed for that period as well. They had to be subscribed for that full 3 months and also not clicked on anything. So there weren't any new people coming in. And we would send them these cute little unsubscribe campaigns. This one was happy holidays, we're unsubscribing you. We had a Valentine's Day one that was like, it's not you, it's us, we're breaking up. Different things that will allow us to say, hey, thanks for subscribing. We really appreciate that you were interested in our content. Clearly it didn't work out, and that's fine. We're not upset. We hope to clear some time in your inbox, clear some space in your inbox by no longer emailing you. And we had this little button that you can't really see that said, wait, keep me subscribed. And anyone who actually did want to stay subscribed, sometimes they just forgot that we existed. Sometimes we were lost in their promotions tab, and this was a good reminder to move us to the main tab. And sometimes they just needed that nudge to get back into it, which is really what re-engagement campaigns do as well. Finding creative ways to reach out to people who are no longer engaged with your content. And so we usually do this at below the fold, or we're figuring it out the exact time. But the place that we're toying with right now is when someone goes from 4 stars to 3 or 2, where they're kind of rarely opening our emails, and we want to say, hey, maybe getting below the fold multiple times a week is too much for you. Should we switch you to a weekly? It's not something we offer right out the gate, but if we realize that some people are starting to unengage or we're sending them too much, maybe we can reel it back, but still keep them in some way as a valuable contact, which also benefits our sponsorship strategy, because when we sign on sponsors, we can say, hey, you can join our sponsorship slot for a regular email, and for an upgrade, you can also get a bonus selection of people who get below the fold weekly. So there's some strategic ways you can use that audience too when you start to use these levers, but you don't have to do something different. These re-engagement campaigns can just be a way to nudge people. And we've seen from our tests that usually we're able to reactivate between 2 to 3% of dormant users, which is better than nobody, right? And so we're able to pull some of those people back in and turn them into engaged contacts. And one thing that I really like that we haven't tried too deeply yet, but that I've heard success in from some friends, is just simply asking for updates. Sometimes people don't even remember what email they subscribed with. Maybe they're like, oh, I signed up with my work email. I'd actually rather get this on my personal email, or vice versa. Maybe they're about to switch jobs and they want to change things. And so every now and then, if you're seeing a large soft bounce or undeliverable rate, you can try nudging them with being like, hey, just wanted to check in, make sure we have the right information for you, make sure we have the right email for you. And you'll get some cohort of people responding back and being like, actually, I'd like to update my email to X, Y, or Z. Which can help, again, just make some people come back to life. Obviously, in that case, there'll be some that truly are just undeliverable addresses that you won't be able to reach, but you'll be able to get some percentage back. And so all of these are different ways to convert these inactive contacts into active ones. And then we also optimize for healthy lists, rid of dead or spam emails. I saw Zero Bounce commenting on Ashley's LinkedIn post. So if you guys are listening, what's up? Thanks for having an amazing product. So we use Zero Bounce to help validate our contacts. We try, I actually love, if anyone has ideas here, if you get a lot of spam on your form fills, we try so many things. We try the capture forms, we try double opt-in, and we like these things. We don't love them. We're still figuring out the best way to do it, but we are trying to actively work on validating our contacts to get rid of those spam accounts, to get rid of those mass emails that sometimes filter into your subscriber base. And Zero Bounce does a great job of helping us. The other thing that Zero Bounce helps us with is finding typoed emails, which can be a little bit of a pain for us to go through and manually fix, but it can be worth it because that person has indicated their interest. And so what this means is that someone has typed in gmail.com or gmail.com X. And so they've made some slight variation that now means they're not actually getting your content. And we go through and we'll look at those contacts that Zero Bounce has marked as not valid, see if there's any typos in there, and then manually in our ESP go through and update those because we think that time is worth it to get those contacts because they have showed interest. They just made a mistake along the way. And then, of course, enabling double opt-in, which, as I mentioned, we use it. We're testing it, we're experimenting with it, but there's good and bads to double opt-in. Essentially, that's requiring people to reconfirm right on sign up that they want to have your newsletter. And so you can use it, you can't use it. There's different ways. I would recommend just experimenting and seeing what works best for you. And so this constant churning and scrubbing ultimately keeps unsubscribe rates low. Ideally, you want to be under 1%. Helps you have healthier engagement, whether it's open rates, click rates, you name it, and helps you revive otherwise dormant readers, people that you might have lost, but you're able to bring back and turn into healthy, engaged contacts for your newsletter. Now, this brings us to our very last section, which is subscriber onboarding, which benefits both churn and retention. So let's dig into that. Now, again, pulling back from my experience on the HubSpot sales team. So working with the sales product team, there was one single month where we ran 60 plus onboarding experiments. Of course, we were, again, a team of 8, so very different than our small newsletter teams, but we ran 60 plus experiments solely focused on onboarding. And what onboarding means is when someone signs up for your product, what are the steps they go through to ultimately use your product, right? With a physical product, it's usually some sort of instructions to build the thing, but with a digital product, it's usually a tutorial or some sort of messaging that gets you to the ultimate product to get you to that aha moment of using the product as quickly as possible. And so we ran 60 plus, and you can see screenshots of different variations. Again, it's pretty blurry now, of trying to figure out what onboarding helps users actually stick around and use the product. What do they need to learn to stick around? What triggers help them understand they need to stick around, or just what messaging really gets them to be like, yes, this is a product I signed up for, and this is how I want to use it. And all these things helped us in a minuscule way add up to benefit, in this case, user retention. We were just focused on how do we keep as many users around by just making sure their onboarding process is clean. And so when you turn to content email subscriptions, especially back then, it's not as sophisticated. You subscribe, you get some sort of either double opt-in email or please confirm my subscription or welcome, and then you get whatever your next piece of content is. So in the case of my HubSpot sales blog, I could have sent you the worst post we've ever posted that has the least performing metrics because that's the post that we happen to send the day after that you subscribed, right? And so you're kind of doing this huge gamble of, I hope this new piece of content that we just put together is something that benefits you and keeps you around, but it might have just been the worst piece of content and therefore given you the worst first impression possible. And so And I'm guilty of this too, because oftentimes when we're at small teams, we just don't have time to do all this. So what I'm about to share, I think it's the ideal. I haven't even fully perfected it for Below the Fold. I have a bunch of written out mock-ups for how I want to do it. And we have some interns joining this summer. So I'm excited to get people on it. But I've done this too, where you're like, okay, you know what? I just need to send something. And so I'm just going to be like, hey, thanks for signing up. Follow us on social media. Something super simple to get people some sort of welcome email. But the better way to do it is that, unlike with products, most marketers and bloggers don't strategically onboard their subscribers, right? We just start sending them emails. And so the better way to do it is to actually onboard subscribers, to be very cautious about what is the actual first interaction that people have with your content. And the other reason this is important too is that sometimes, especially if you're a weekly or a monthly, we send right now twice a week on Wednesdays and Fridays. And we find that sometimes people who subscribe on a Saturday or Sunday will email us by Monday or Tuesday being like, hey, like I subscribed, I haven't seen anything, like am I on the list? And it's purely because of the intervals that we send out. So if you're a weekly or a monthly, sometimes people might be subscribing and getting no value from you until a week later, at which point it's too late to give them that immediate aha moment that helps them retain as readers. And so what I recommend instead is that a reader subscribes and then they enter some sort of drip campaign, onboarding campaign, automation campaign, insert your marketing term of choice, that allows them to actually onboard as readers to your newsletter. So this is what we did for the HubSpot sales blog. It's one way of doing it, but I'm sure you can experiment and find ways that work for you. What we did is I looked at over the past year worth of sending our sales content, what were the top performing posts that whenever I emailed, just always hit the mark, always got lots of click-through rates, always got lots of open rates. And I made that the very first piece of content a subscriber got. Like Ashley subscribed for our sales blog on Tuesday. Within an hour, she has our best post ever, giving her the best first impression of what our content actually looks like. We found that really helped pull people in and be like, oh, wow, this is a taste of what I'm going to be getting. Then after that, the next day, they would receive their welcome or hope you enjoyed email like, hey, thanks for subscribing. You got our first post. Hope you enjoyed it. Here are some other ways to stay engaged with us. After that, we sent them another top post, so another post guaranteed to make sure they opened, clicked, and loved the content. After going through this whole campaign, we moved them to our regular subscriber list where they actually started getting regular intervals of our content, whatever was published next. And we found that when we did this, instead of just having people subscribe and get whatever content comes published next, by strategically sending them important content and high engaging content, we were able to double our engagement rates, actually get people very interested in our content and keep them around as better, more retained readers who are more engaged, clicking through, which of course benefits all of our sponsorship opportunities and other things that we do by ensuring that people are more engaged with the content. And so in summary, we're looking at making sure we care about our readers retaining, that we take out and churn the people who are not benefiting us, if anything are hurting us, and that we're onboarding our subscribers in a way that actually helps us retain more people and churn less people. Hope you enjoyed the chat. That's everything here. If you liked what I had to say, maybe vote for Below the Fold. No, I'm just kidding. But also check out Below the Fold at belowthefold.news. Those are our Instagram and Twitter handles as well. So feel free to stay engaged. And I'm just at Anum on Twitter. Thank you so much.
Awesome. I have some questions in my head if we don't have anyone popping them in yet, but I want to switch back to just non-screen share, but I want to give everyone a chance to see those links or to have Seth like maybe take a screen capture and then put them in the chat so we don't lose those while we have our conversation.
Sure.
All right. So one question that comes to mind, and I think it's an interesting question because different people with ESPs have different, like for the newsletter specific ESPs, like it's really like one welcome email and there aren't drips built in. Like maybe they will become more like marketing automation platforms at one point.
Yeah.
But I noticed that when we did the Newsletter Fest newsletter and we put like maybe the top 5 newsletter tips articles, like links to those in the welcome email, that seemed to perform really well and it set an expectation. Is that a way to not have 3 emails as a series, but to still have to deliver that what you're talking about, which is like, to me, that's the dopamine hit. Like that's the this is why I signed up.
Yeah, yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
think obviously all ESPs are different, and so if you aren't set up to send some sort of drip campaigns, I would consider one of two things. One, exactly what you just said, which is giving them a taste of that content, maybe a link to an archive or a link to a post that's really helpful in that first email. The other is to consider emailing them just from your Gmail, just one time, which can also help in making sure that you get to your primary inbox and being like, hey, thanks for subscribing to my newsletter. I just wanted to quickly flag X, Y, or Z. And then also, you can use that opportunity to get them to add you to your contacts or move you out of promotions, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be another option, is just look at your subscriber list. Maybe you set it up every week or every month, depending on what your subscriber flow looks like. And you just have a pre-scripted email that you send out over your own personal email. But yeah, those are two ways to
Wonderful.
do it.
Wonderful idea. And Sean says that that's what he was going to ask too. I am quite clairvoyant these days, except when I haven't eaten well. I'm looking for new questions to come in.
No worries.
That's okay. Everyone's processing. But in addition, like, I feel like when we think about treating a newsletter like a product, that there is another element of that I took Marcus Andrews' narrative design course recently, and that's a lot like beyond story brand to me. That's about like building a moat around your brand as it being like this very uniquely positioned offering that no one else even can compete with.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to talk about if you thought about that with Below the Fold, and how you thought about like the way you might position a product, the way you were positioning that newsletter.
Yeah. So when we think about and have internal discussions about where our newsletter is going to go, is we really think about ourselves as a media company. And so we think about what would it take to become, we want to be sort of your encyclopedia for everything below the fold. If there are hidden products, hidden apps, hidden stories, like what are all the things that are really difficult to find on the internet or learn about, and make below the fold your destination for them. And so the newsletter is kind of that place where we're building a community and building what could be considered our moat. Like, here's our most valuable product, our most engaged community, but built on top of that is now all these other offerings, all these other pieces of value that we can give you. And we really learned that the hard way. So Ashley, when you first interviewed me for the Curated channel, it was when we were still Accio. And so for everyone here, Accio was formerly our company, and we had a Chrome extension that used AI to help give you context to your news. Below the Fold was just sort of this newsletter we created on the side to help engage those product users. But we realized it was really hard to grow straight with a product, because that product didn't have community. A Chrome extension doesn't have the benefit of, engaging with people, being able to go back and forth and build that sort of impact. And so we switched focus fully to our newsletter to build this really strong community base. And in the future, we can bring back our tech product and a below the fold premium offering that allows people to further optimize their news reading, but we allow the newsletter to sort of become that base community. And I think that's really where a lot of us have the benefit of newsletters, is just being able to use them to create a community that we can then sell products or other offerings to in the future.
Interesting. Okay, so you have to think about your newsletter as a product for your readers, but also as a product for your sponsors.
Yes.
Right? So when you're thinking about like the list cleaning, I think a lot of people get like nervous because they're thinking, oh gosh, if I cut all the unengaged people off my list, now I can't tell the sponsor that I have this many people. But your engagement rate just went way up because the people that you did. Yeah. So what do you advise people about with making those sorts of decisions?
Yeah, I mean, I get nervous too, so I'm there with you. I think it depends on how you're doing your selling. Obviously, but the thing is, even if it's a CPM basis or a flat rate, if you have less subscribers, higher engagement rate, that always looks way better than more subscribers and less engagement rate. And so I've gotten nervous about that in the past. And sometimes I even lowball the number of subscribers we have to potential sponsors, because I'd rather have a high engagement rate for when things are fluctuating than highball. And that actually proved out and benefit to me recently. So we were like touting this number that was like pretty true, but our engagement rates were kind of slipping. It was holiday time, and the sponsors that we had during that time did not come back. They did not come back. They did not return. This past month, I've been a little bit more reserved. We've actually grown more than the number I've been using for sponsors, and that actually benefited me because they had better engagement rates, and they came back, and one sponsor's like, sign me up for this monthly rate until end of year, right? And so sometimes it can be hard. You want to show this big number, but I've even had some sponsors email me being like, hey, is that based off of unique opens or total opens? Because they're starting to catch on that sometimes they're being told these big numbers to sell them into a sponsorship slot, which again, just like reader retention, sponsor retention is also important. And so if you are getting a sponsor that just tries it, doesn't love it, and doesn't come back, it's so much harder to get a new sponsor versus now we have one monthly booked out spot until the end of year, and I don't need to worry about going out and finding a sponsor, right? And so make sure you think about sponsor retention as well. I'm definitely not the sponsorships expert. I know Jake has a great talk on this. I'm not sure if it happened or about to happen. So I would.
It was right before this.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So he definitely has all the answers, but that's just been my experience when it comes to retaining sponsors.
Interesting. So I think I'm in your boat. What do you do about because below the fold, because the content in it is meant to be consumed in it, like you link to things, but like the intention is consumption versus click-throughs, right? Yeah. So I'm assuming open rate is your like North Star metric, right? So where was my question going though? With that, with open rates, and you don't have a lot of images, but you do have a few, like, do you feel like you're seeing a true open rate, or that it could be slightly higher than what you're seeing because some people have images turned off?
That's something we're still figuring out. The whole email deliverability world, especially because open rates is our North Star, as you mentioned, is something we're constantly iterating. We switched ESPs recently, and our open rates across the two are very, very different. The opens are about the same. So I think it's just like how they're being tracked. And so we just have the header image right now, and we're even trying to figure out like, how do we lower the weight of that one image so that it doesn't take up, but we are very focused on text and buttons and links. Like, we really try to avoid a lot of imagery. Our comic of the week is actually just ASCII art. So again, it can just be text and people can get it without having to focus on visuals. And so we're optimizing, like you said, for that open rate. And that's why we don't have images. That's why we focus on solely having as much text-based value as possible.
We got a question in. I'm going to ask Kim if she wants to come on and ask it. If you'll just drop in the chat or accept Seth's invitation to promote you to panelist. We'd love to have you come on and ask, but if not, I will ask it for you. Does that mean she accepted your invitation if she appeared there? Nope, she's multitasking. I will ask for you, Kim. All right. What are your, what do you think about growth? Like, what are your performing channels and strategies for growth?
Yeah, so this is something we're actually going to be spending a lot of time on this summer. As I mentioned, we have some awesome new team members joining. So for us, my favorite channel, again, is a channel that I use from my days as a marketer, and that's placement strategy. And so what placement strategy means is that in whatever niche you're in, there's already a ton of blogs, websites, audiences that exist talking about what you care about. And so I reach out to those audiences and I say, hey, like, Below the Fold would make a great example, a great addition, or I could write an entire guest post for you for your blog. And I try to get us placed into other audiences. And so that has actually helped us get placed on a few lists of newsletters you should be subscribed to. Excuse me. as well as get us onto a few lists for things in our domain. And so I am constantly pitching myself, my writing abilities to other blogs that have audiences. And I'm like, hey, I'll give you a free guest post. All you have to do is be willing to have Below the Fold mentioned in it or be an example in it. And that helps us send inbound traffic from people who already have an audience built, which is way more bang for my buck than trying to continue a separate blog for Below the Fold, which I do, but we really only post to our own internal blog about once a month, and it's really just for the benefit of SEO, and it is sending us a lot of organic traffic, but it's purely an SEO strategy versus the placement strategy is how do we actually reach out to other blogs that already have an audience and try to get either featured in a post they've already written or offer to create a post for them. So that's my number one favorite strategy. But we're going to be focusing a lot more on social media this summer. I don't know when I went, I consider myself pretty young, but I don't know when I went from the phase where I'm not young enough for social media anymore. So we hired a Gen Zer to join us and do TikToks and find different ways to put Below the Fold out there, because I'm no longer, I no longer know what's going on. So I'm really excited about that, because again, our whole thesis is that we're helping you discover stories that you aren't hearing anywhere else. And so we've been, and a lot of our investors think there's a big possibility for these social media channels and TikTok where a lot of news goes viral and spreads, and for us to be the people pumping in different news people haven't heard of on those channels. So TBD on how all that goes.
Nice. If you're too old for social media, I'm way too old for social media.
I was like, when did this happen? I swear I was the young social girl that everyone turned to at one point. But
I was laughing when you asked us what our Instagram handle was, and I was like, nothing. Oopsie. I feel like you can only devote like a certain amount of bandwidth to like certain channels. Exactly. You can't be everything to everyone. And I think that's good about in a conversation about product positioning, right? Is like figure out your niche, figure out who you're going to serve. Kim thanks you for answering her question. You've already welcomed her. Never mind. I'm narrating something that's already happened.
No, you're fine.
Any other questions coming in for Anum? Please remember that there is the Q&A, and that will make it hop out to me a little easier if you see that little 2 thought bubbles symbol down at the bottom, and we will get them answered. Seth, have you thought of any questions during this process? I feel like I see your brain like.
Yeah, you would be right. That's impressive that you can see my brain working like that. But one question I did have was, so you mentioned that you kind of have that onboarding sequence of right when they subscribe, you're sending them an email with your best content that you're linking them to. What kind of performance do you see on those first emails that go out right after subscription, like open rates and click rates and all that stuff?
Yeah, so we usually see for those like either double the open rate or click-through rate as our normal send. So like if we, and the exact metrics I have for the example I showed us from the HubSpot sales blogs, which I think we would get anywhere from like 60 to 75% open rates on those onboarding, which is like, that's like really high, right? Like that's really, really high. And it's the first email they're getting from you. They just signed up, so they're already more likely. But now if the content is actually valuable versus a generic thanks, they're even more likely. They're like, you get a thank you email and you usually just like leave it. But they're seeing the subject line actually has content in it. You can get a preview, there's content. And so we saw between 60 and 70% open rates for those HubSpot sales welcome emails.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And what, that's an interesting question based on your experience in SaaS startup, newsletter. Can you talk about like open rates and click-through rates and things that we have had some people in some of these sessions who were not aware that they had good open rates, right? Like someone emailed me a few weeks ago with like, hey, our open rate is at 40%. We're worried. We're not sure what we could do to improve this. And I was like, well, I'm going to stop you right now.
40% is great.
But I think it's like worth a continued conversation, because until you like get a certain amount into the industry, you don't know what you should know about how well you're doing. So
yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think I would say anything above 20%, like you're doing enough to keep going. Like, you know what I mean? It's worth to be like, yes, your newsletter is worth your time. I would say anything below 20%, I would like evaluate if it's really worth the time, if you need to figure something out. But obviously the range you really want to be in is between 30 to 40%. I know that I think Morning Brew touts like a 50% open rate. I would love to figure out how to get there. I think that's like very, very, very impressive. I think part of it though, from my experience at HubSpot, is like being a daily. I think if you are hitting people every single day, then they're just much more likely. It becomes like a daily routine, right? Which can help your open rates versus a weekly or a monthly. But we are, I don't know if we'll ever be a daily, to be honest, at Below the Fold, but yeah.
I can attest to the fact that for opt-in weekly, we're like around 30, but
Awesome.
we launched, it has less subscribers, but we launched the Newsletter Fest newsletter because a festival about newsletters needs a newsletter, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this is just going to be an optional thing, right? You can completely engage in this festival without getting that newsletter. But if you want updates about the speakers we're adding, or it was very much like bring people along for the journey.
Yeah.
And that's how we set it up. That has surprised me so much. And I think it's because it's just like a clear value prop. And like we delivered what we said. 8 issues over 7 weeks and an average open rate of 60% with a click-through rate of 18%. So some things may surprise you. Like the thing you think that's like, I'm like, this is so standard and boilerplate, and it's going to deliver the same information every Friday. Like that was the thing that like performed that way. So like it might take some like trial and error to find the thing that people really, really love. And I think it was what Margot Aaron said in her session, was that like, we worry about annoying people, but if they're in the market, it's not annoying. Like if you're the boy band that everyone has a crush on, then they want every poster kind of thing, was her analogy, which I really loved.
I like that analogy too.
And I mentioned the New Kids on the Block when I had to talk about my generation. So that tells you I'm also too old for social media.
Yeah, but it's that clear expectation setting, right? I think that's what really helps. And that's something that we're still trying to figure out with Below the Fold too. So the other thing that I talk about very often in this whole sphere is how to A/B test like a marketer when it comes to your newsletter. And I'm going to be writing, I'm actually just got through that placement strategy, a guest post approved on this topic. So I'm happy to let everyone know once that's written. But it's all around how to run tasks quickly and with value for your newsletter so you can constantly iterate to benefit. And I think that's one of the things that we definitely learned in the past year of Below the Fold is how do we set the best expectations for what kind of content you're going to get, because that makes people more likely to open. And we haven't figured it out 100%. That's why we're still testing, but we're much closer than we were a year ago. And so I do think that expectation setting really helps as well.
I think also there's like merit into like being mentally okay with the fact that you're going to always be testing.
Yeah.
Like the world is not staying the same. Like you will never like get to that perfect moment where it's like, this is the product and it will be this forever. Right. So I feel like newsletters, like give yourself room to evolve. Might be the phrase to use there. I am looking, I'm not seeing questions. Here's what Sean said, is that it was so well done that it limited the questions that I thought I would have coming into the session, which so I think is a testament. Yeah. Thank you, Anum, for that presentation. Like you hit every point and left very little gaps in what people might want to know. So we're very appreciative of that. We might even end this session earlier than 4:00.
Awesome.
Seth, was that the only question that you had? I love that we're using this for product research. The Newsletter Fest is just for Curated to find out what you want.
That's true. Yeah. No, yeah, that was the only one that came to mind. Yeah, it was a fantastic presentation.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm thinking about product positioning. I read April Dunbar's, if anyone's looking for like a product positioning book, it's called Obviously Awesome. And I think there are like lots of ties into like how you could position your newsletter. And she gives like a great framework of why you do what you do when you do product positioning. But she did talk about, like, I think some people might be considering if they're a small fish in a big pond, like how to niche down. Do you have any like backstory on how you figured out that you like that this was the direction that Below the Fold was going to take? I know that Accio was a part of that, but I would love for you to kind of talk about the initial positioning and finding its voice.
Yeah, so as mentioned, we used to have our tech product called Accio. And again, it was a product that used AI to help give you context to your news. And so very specifically, as you landed on a news article, we pulled up this like bookmark sleeve on your screen that gave you a timeline of articles previously published on that same topic. So you could, sometimes it feels like going into an article, you're like at chapter 3 and you're like, wait, what happened before? And so what we found is that people not only loved getting caught up on what was happening and getting the context of their news story, but they loved finding stories on that timeline they had never heard of and being like, wait, I didn't know this ever happened, because it never made it to headline news. It never became a trending topic. And, when we used to all read from physical papers, you could just flip to page 2 or 3. But now on the internet, like everything is just an infinite scroll of page 1. Like it's all just continuously page 1 news. And it's really hard to get to that page 3 or 4. And so that was like literally the first name for our product, for our newsletter, was page 2 news. We're like, oh, we'll create a newsletter. It's going to be called page 2. And the whole idea is that you're going to be getting stuff that would have been published on page 2. We ended up going to Below the Fold. We obviously did like a couple of different iterations and thinking, and the very first copy we used, it'll be in that post. I know Miriam asked for it as well, and she asked how we could get it. If you follow me on LinkedIn, Anum Hussain, or on Twitter at Anum, I'll definitely post it on those channels once it goes live. So that's how I would get that post. But in that, I'll see the copy that we used at first. It was something like hidden stories, or like news that's not on the front page, something like that. And it people didn't fully grasp what we were doing. I thought it was very clear, but people weren't fully grasping it. And so then we actually sent out a survey. And in that survey, we asked people, what do you like most about Below the Fold? And then, I kid you not, all these random readers from all across the world, and multiple responded saying news I haven't heard anywhere else, like using those same exact words. And our advisor in a call completely separately 2 weeks before said that those same words as to why he liked Below the Fold. And we were like, wow, okay, these are the exact words coming out of the mouths of our most engaged readers who are filling out our surveys, who are reading every week. And so that's what we tested. We did all of our A/B tests along the headlines we had been using, and then this idea of news you aren't hearing anywhere else. And it always surpassed every other version that we had in the past. It had higher submission rates, better engagement rates, and it just really helped people understand what we were doing. And so it's a long answer to your question, but that's sort of how we evolved and how we figured out what we wanted it to be, and then how we actually figured out the exact words that worked for people.
I love that. I am very pro, like, find out who you are by doing a thing. Like, find out what the product should be by doing a thing. Get an audience and figure out what they want, right? So if there are no further questions, we have, Seth has dropped Anum's LinkedIn, her Twitter, and some people have made some like complimentary comments. I want to capture this one live. Miriam said, agree, it was a great presentation. Signed up for your newsletter, which looks great. Like, these are the kinds of things we want to be bringing you on Newsletter Fest for next year, to talk about like the ways that you were inspired, and then like what you went and did. So that was my goal with this whole thing, was to find people who I knew we would record these sessions, we would get them out, and then I'm going to make like smaller clips, and we're going to share some of those with you. So if you want to share them directly, but I feel like they're like moments of genius, and that your presentation, actually the whole thing was. So super excited to have had you here, and appreciate you coming. Everyone say thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for all the kind words. And thank you, Ashley and Seth, for this awesome event. I'm super excited for Newsletter Fest to grow and be this big industry standard place for all of us to gather and learn and share. So awesome work with it so far.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Last link to drop is the one to the Slack community, because that is where you go and treat it like it's the bar at night after you went to all the sessions, right? Like, but you can just do it midday. We don't need to know what's in your hand while you're doing that. All right. Thank you, everyone. We will be back at 5:00 Eastern to teach you how to curate links like a pro. So that is a branded session. It will start off general and just show you how to curate links. So if you're working outside of our platform, please join. But then we will be diving into some of the automations that allow you to use tools like Feedly and Up Content and Bubble Up and things like that to be collecting links around certain keywords and then choosing them within that platform. Like if you favorite something in Pocket, then it zips it over to Curated and has it waiting for you in your curated links section. So that is the last session of the day. And then we will be back tomorrow for 3 sessions, one of which is a panel that I don't know if you're interested in that, Anum, but I am like so freaking excited about the panel where marketers and journalists put their brains together and talk about what they're borrowing from each other, because there is no longer like a wall, right?
Yeah.
Like the wall is gone and we're all just kind
I'm sitting
like,
in both camps, so I see it. I'm excited for that one.
Exactly. So that's happening. And then there are 2 other sessions, one of which is the closing ceremony. And then I'm checking to make sure what the last one is. Oh, it's Paved coming in to talk about positioning your newsletter. Like this kind of will delve further than Anum's, but be from the sponsorships point of the sponsor's point of view, telling you what sponsors are looking for specifically, especially sponsors who are willing to pay big money. So they're going to kind of bring their expert team in and tell us what they've seen going on in the world of newsletter sponsorship matching. So I think that's all. Let's all say goodbye and thank you. Really.
Thank you. Have a